Chapter 1. A Shredded Glove Box and a Deadly Discovery. I had scarcely finished my morning coffee on that crisp April dawn when the summons arrived. An engraved card slipped beneath my door bearing the elegant script of my dear friend, Monsieur Hercule Poirot. Meet me at Belgrave Crescent, number 12. Urgent. Peep-bee. My heart quickened. Poirot's summons, marked urgent, bespoke some twist worthy of his little gray cells. A brisk walk through London's awakening streets brought me to the wrought iron gates of Belgrave Crescent, where polished motor cars gleamed like jewels beneath a pale spring sky. Poirot stood before a sleek black Bentley, his posture as precise as the crease of his morning trousers. His mustache quivered with barely contained excitement. "Ah, Hastings, you are punctual as always," he greeted me in that unmistakable Belgian lilt. "A most curious affair, and I require your presence." He nodded toward the rear of the Bentley, where its boot lay open. One glance was enough to banish any lingering slumber. The glove box, its liner shredded into fibrous fragments, lay strewn across the gravel like confetti in a dead man's wake. Shredded? I echoed, stepping forward. Could someone have tried to destroy evidence? Poirot's eyes sparkled. Exactly, mon ami. But the question is, what were they seeking? And why was this discarded so recklessly? He held out a single strip of liner, fragile, beige, and utterly incongruous in its artistry. Observe carefully. This is no common glove box liner. It is lined with leather of the finest grain, dyed to match the upholstery. A touch worthy of M. Fournier's bespoke carriage fittings. I leaned closer, noting the embossed motif. A lion passant beneath the Tudor rose. An emblem for Lord Ashcombe's crest, Poirot murmured, owner of this house. As I glanced up at number 12, its Palladian facade seemed to wear an air of genteel dignity at odds with the queer spectacle before us. The servants, pale and trembling, circled at a respectful distance. One maid, her voice cracking, whispered that her master, Lord Reginald Ashcombe, had not been seen since the previous evening. Missing? I asked. Or worse. Poirot flicked a gloved hand toward the grand front door, which hung ajar. We shall see. Inside, the entrance hall stretched like a cathedral nave. Marble floors, Corinthian columns, and portraits of grim ancestors watching our intrusion with silent reproach. Poirot pressed a button on a silver handset by the door. "Inspector Morton," he announced. "Pray ensure no one leaves the premises until I have completed my inspection." We proceeded down a dim corridor, where lamps flickered as if whispering secrets. At the far end lay the library, its door thrown open. Bodies, when found, are seldom neat. Here, however, the carnage was almost clinical. Lord Ashcombe lay sprawled across the oriental rug, a single bullet wound dampening the ivory of his shirt. Nearby, a mahogany desk spat out scattered parchments, estate ledgers, personal letters, and most tellingly, fragments of documents shredded beyond recognition. Poirot crouched, lifting a corner of the rug with the tip of his cane. Notice, Hastings, how the pattern is unsoiled except where his body was placed. The culprit placed him here with some deliberation. He beckoned me closer to the desk. And what do we see here? A shredder, mechanical, electric, efficient. But why shred these letters? I peered at the remnants. Smudged ink, decimated phrases. Perhaps he received a letter threatening him, and the murderer wished to conceal its contents. Precisely. Poirot extracted a single fragment of paper and held it between thumb and forefinger. But note the quality of the paper. It is of a ledger, not a private letter. The murderer cared not for blackmail notes, but for financial records. He tapped his temple. Mon Dieu, Hastings, this is not a crime of passion. This is meticulous, premeditated, and connected to Lord Ashcombe's affairs. A sudden clatter from the hallway announced the arrival of Inspector Morton, a solid man with a stoic face. He saluted stiffly. "Monsieur Poirot, the coroner will be here shortly. Forgive the intrusion, but I must insist we secure the cabinet in the study. Lord Ashcombe's safe seems to have been forced." Poirot rose, smoothing his waistcoat. "Good. Then our circle widens, the butcher, the baker, and all who keep books." He turned to me, a twinkle in his eye. "Hastings, you shall remain here." I must interview the household staff and any guests who dined with Lord Ashcombe last night. Please fetch his valet. He has information I feel far more valuable than these shredded bits. I nodded and hurried off, my mind racing. Already I sense the first threads of an intricate tapestry, alliances betrayed, secrets hidden, fortunes at stake. Even now, I cannot guess how deeply this crime would reach into the heart of society. By the time I returned with the valet, Poirot was bent over the shattered safe, his cane tracing patterns among the splintered lock. "Ah, there you are," he exclaimed as the young man entered, trembling. "Mon cher, I beg you, recount your master's activities yesterday, no matter how trivial they seem." And so began our entry into a world of whispered confidences and veiled threats, where a shredded glove-box liner would prove the first glimmer of truth. In that moment, as I watched Poirot's keen gaze sweep the room, I knew that this affair, so elegantly named for its curious clue, would test his famed little gray cells as never before. Chapter 2. The First Clues. The morning sun had climbed higher when Monsieur Poirot summoned me from the library to the adjoining drawing-room, where a small group of guests and household staff had gathered under Inspector Morton's watchful eye. The tension in the room was as palpable as the scent of fresh roses in a vase by the fireplace, an incongruous comfort amidst the grim business before us. Poirot, with his ever-precise posture, swept the room with one elegant hand. "Mess Amos, we must begin the examination of the facts. Each of you knows Lord Ashcombe, but few have seen him in the state in which I found him." His voice was calm, yet carried a weight that drew every pair of eyes. The first to step forward was Mrs. Winifred Cartwright, Lady Ashcombe's elderly companion. Her face, lined with concern, went ashen at the mention of her mistress's name. I did not see him after dinner," she stammered. "He retired to his study at 9, as was his custom." "Custom indeed," Poirot murmured, yet the shredder in his study was switched on well after midnight. He allowed a moment for that to settle. "Madame Cartwright, did you hear the shredder?" She hesitated. "Only the thunder of rain against the window. I did not notice any machine noises." "Interesting." Poirot turned to the valet, Jameson, who stood stiffly by the door. "And you, mon ami, when did you last see your master?" "Shortly before 10, Jameson replied. "He asked me to fetch his dressing-gown. I delivered it at 9:47 p.m. "Precise," Poirot said, nodding. "And did he mention any visitors afterward?" "None, sir." I watched Poirot's eyes flicker. "Very well. Let us proceed to the study." Inside, Poirot carefully reopened the shredder's safety cover. "Look here," he said, showing us the empty feed tray. "No fibers remain. Someone cleared it completely. Yet Mr. Jameson claims no disturbance. Is that plausible?" Jameson shook his head. Confusion etched across his youthful features. "Impossible, monsieur. I would have known." Poirot replaced the cover and moved to the desk where the scattered papers lay. He picked up a torn half-envelope, stained at one corner. "Observe, Hastings, no postal stamp. It was delivered by hand." He peered at the wax seal, half melted. The Ashcombe lion and rose. Yes, but off center as though hurriedly affixed. I leaned in. Suggest someone delivered a secret message, then retrieved it before anyone noticed. "Perhaps," Poirot replied, "or perhaps they intended us to find this fragment." He pressed the wax with his cane tip. "Notice the fragment's position, atop the ledger, near the margin. Whoever discarded these sought to conceal financial evidence, debts, embezzlement, then panicked and abandoned the task." Turning, Poirot motioned me to the mantelpiece. "What do you make of these cufflinks?" 2 gold links, inscribed with stylized R.A., rested on a small velvet tray. I examined them. Lord Ashcombe's, surely, but why removed? A vital question. Poirot pocketed one cufflink. Someone searched him, possibly rifled his pockets. Yet the murderer made no attempt to hide these. An odd oversight, non? At that moment, a tremor of movement by the window caught our attention. A pair of muddy footprints on the white marble sill. They led inward, then vanished beneath the Persian carpet. Footprints upon the sill, Poirot observed, indicates the window was forced open, no key used. He tapped his fingertips together. Our murderer chose a less conspicuous route. Garden to window, then into the study. But why enter the house when access to the library to the hall was unobstructed? Inspector Morton frowned. Perhaps to avoid detection by the upstairs staff. Perhaps, Poirot conceded, but I sense more. He bent to study the footprint's heel. The sole pattern is of a continental design, narrow, elegant, likely bespoke. Who among our circle favors such footwear? The assembled party exchanged nervous glances. Mrs. Cartwright clutched her shawl. Jameson's jaw clenched ever so slightly. Poirot rose and approached the hearth, where an ivory-handled poker lay abandoned. He tapped it twice against the tiled hearth. And here, the poker warmed and smudged. Our culprit used a tool of convenience, not elegance. Why mix brutality with refinement? I felt the room close in. To mislead us? I ventured. Exactly, Hastings. A bit of misdirection. A red herring of casual violence to distract from the calculated financial motive. Poirot held a steady gaze. Note, however, the faint scent of cigars in the air, strong, sweet, Cuban. Lord Ashcombe did not partake after dinner. Who among us smokes Havana cigars? A soft cough from Dr. Beatrice Linden drew our attention. The family physician, a woman of quiet demeanor, dabbed at her throat. Occasionally, she admitted. Occasionally, Poirot repeated. Tell us, madam, did you visit the study after the storm passed? I observed the window latches wet. Her cheeks reddened. I was uneasy, yes. I entered, closed the window. Rain had seeped in. Then you touched the sill, yet your glove shows no moisture. Poirot held up a white glove, smeared faintly with soot. You removed your glove before closing it, or else your glove would be wet. Dr. Linden swallowed. I removed it out of habit. Habit, Poirot murmured, pocketing the glove. Habits reveal character, mon cher. He turned to me. Hastings, note these details. The hand-delivered message, the attack window, the final escape, and the misplaced assumption of brute force. Each contradicts the next. Together, they form a puzzle that only brilliant execution can resolve. Before we could press further, a sharp knock heralded the arrival of the coroner. Poirot inclined his head in greeting and, with a final glance at the scattered clues, whispered, Our true investigation begins now. As the coroner and his assistants took over, I felt the first shiver of anticipation. The threads of motive, means, and opportunity lay before us. But whoever wove this tapestry had concealed the pattern well. I knew that in these first clues lay the key to unraveling a crime more cunning than any I had witnessed. And Poirot, with steady composure, stood ready to follow each thread to its hidden end. Chapter 3. The Gathering of Suspects. By the time the coroner departed, the great drawing room at number 12 Belgrave Crescent had transformed into an uneasy salon of inquiry. Inspector Morton stood beside the fireplace, his gaze stern, as Poirot surveyed the assembled company with deliberate precision. I took my place at Poirot's side, ready to aid his little gray cells. Mess Amos, Poirot began, his voice smooth as silk. We are now to determine who among you possess motive, means, and opportunity. He raised a slim finger. And for that, we must hear each story. Let us begin with Lady Ashcombe. Lady Helena Ashcombe, a striking woman of 40, her dark hair pinned into an austere chignon, rose with regal composure, yet her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I love my husband dearly, she said, her voice trembling only slightly. Last night we quarreled over business, of all things. He insisted on forcing the sale of our ancestral hunting lodge to cover debts. I begged him to reconsider. She glanced at the valet, Jameson, and then at her niece, Miss Eleanor Radcliffe. He would not listen. Poirot inclined his head. A quarrel, yes, but not the cause of murder. Yet your tears are genuine. He turned to Miss Radcliffe, a slender young woman with flaxen hair and a steel-blue gaze. And you, mademoiselle, you arrived only yesterday, an unexpected guest. I came to celebrate Lord Ashcombe's birthday, Eleanor corrected. But I discovered he had withdrawn my allowance indefinitely. I required funds for my medical training in Edinburgh. She swallowed. When I asked him to reinstate it, he refused. I left in anger, but I returned later to apologize. I found the house in chaos. Poirot's mustache twitched, a motive of desperation, not unimportant. And yet, Miss Radcliffe, you claim to have returned after crime was committed? She nodded, tears in her lashes. Just after midnight. I confess, I slipped to the garden, but I discovered nothing until the police arrived. Inconvenient, Poirot murmured. He then gestured toward Dr. Linden. Dr. Beatrice Linden, family physician and longtime friend. What of you? The doctor, draped in modest gray silk, adjusted her pince-nez. My dear patients often seek my counsel late into the night. I visited Lord Ashcombe at 10 to discuss his blood pressure. He had complained of headaches. I administered a sedative, mild, but I never expected it to be lethal. A sedative? Poirot repeated. An interesting detail. You delivered it in wine, perhaps? Dr. Linden's lips parted, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Yes, but I assure you, only a quarter of a grain. Standard dosage. We all noted her hesitation. Poirot tucked that away. And the night nurse, Madame Cartwright. Why were you in the library at such a late hour? The elderly companion bowed her head. I retire early, but I could not sleep. I walked down the corridor, intending only to read. I heard rustling in the study. I thought it was a shredder, but then silence. Her arthritic hands clutched the edge of her shawl. I peeked in and saw nothing at first, until I found the window ajar. Your testimony, though sincere, contradicts your claim of ignorance of the shredder, Poirot observed. You heard it, yet you deny it. She gasped. I thought it was thunder. Poirot allowed a small smile. Nature is no substitute for machinery. And est-il pas? He moved smoothly to the valet, Jameson. And you, sir, my dear Jameson, did your master confide any secrets to you last evening? Jameson swallowed hard, his pallor pronounced. Only that he feared for his fortune. He said there were unusual entries in his ledgers, debt staggering even him. He clenched his fists. I begged him to shut down his business ventures, but he would not relent. Motive again, Poirot noted. The threat of ruin. He stepped to the French window. Colonel Fitzwilliam, I understand you were in attendance at Ashcombe Hall for dinner? The colonel, a barrel-chested veteran with a scar along his cheek, nodded crisply. Yes, I dined with Lord Ashcombe to discuss a joint investment in a South African mine. He reneged on our agreement at the last minute, citing concerns over safety. I lost £20,000. 20,000, an enormous sum. Poirot's eyes shone. Yet you remained gentlemanly enough to depart with courtesy. The colonel's scar twitched. A man keeps his temper in public. Poirot turned to the final figure in the room, Mr. Pemberton, the family solicitor, a thin man whose spectacles sat low on his nose. You arranged the will, I believe? Pemberton cleared his throat. Indeed, Lord Ashcombe revised his testament monthly. The latest draft favored his wife and disinherited his nephew in America. He offered a brittle smile. Nephews and learned friends can be inconvenient. An awkward silence fell, broken only by the distant rumble of an approaching thunderstorm. Poirot surveyed each face. Grief, fear, resentment, and desperation. You see, Hastings, he whispered to me, we are a tableau of human folly, each participant with a plausible reason to wish Lord Ashcombe harm. Yet only one dared act. He raised his voice. Messrs. E.T. Mesdames, the crime was no frenzied act of passion. It was a culmination of careful calculation, financial ruin, familial betrayal, professional disappointment. But which thread leads to the killer? We shall explore each in due time. As the storm broke and rain lashed the windows, I sensed attention coalesce into a single knot. The gathering of suspects, Poirot's next masterpiece, had begun, and behind each mask the murderer waited, ever careful, ever watchful, knowing that Poirot saw more than mere faces. He saw the shadows beneath. Chapter 4. Poirot Arrives. It was but an hour after the gathering of suspects that Monsieur Hercule Poirot made his formal entrance into the grand drawing-room, a moment that, for many present, marked the true commencement of the investigation. Though he had already set foot in these halls to inspect the study, this return was different. He entered with deliberate ceremony, his every movement calculated to command attention. I stood beside Inspector Morton when Poirot swept to the double doors, his polished shoes clicking against the parquet floor in immaculate time. His gray suit, tailored perfection, seemed to shimmer beneath the gaslight. In one gloved hand he carried his signature cane. The other remained poised at his side, fingers gently curved as if perpetually engaged in thought. He paused at the threshold, mustache quivering, and allowed his gaze to linger over each face assembled. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice gentle yet firm, "I thank you for your patience. It is now my privilege to assume formal control of this inquiry. Inspector Morton, you have performed admirably, but I trust you will afford me full liberty to pursue the facts as only the little gray cells can permit." Morton inclined his head, deferring gracefully. The suspects murmured their assent, some with relief, others with barely concealed apprehension. I, John Hastings, felt a familiar thrill. Whenever Poirot announced his presence thus, I knew that even the most subtle clue would not escape his notice. Poirot turned first to Lady Ashcombe. He lifted a single brow, observing the fine tremor in her slender hand. "Lady Helena," he said, stepping forward, "your grief is sincere, yet I notice in the study that your gloved finger retained a faint trace of perfume, an exotic blend. Pray, what is your usual scent?" She blinked, startled. I wear only lavender water." She glanced at the others, uncertain. "Lavender is a common fragrance," Poirot replied, "but this scent was not lavender, a far richer composition." He paused, letting the observation hang in the air before moving on. Next, his attention fell upon Dr. Beatrice Linden. He noted the slight discoloration beneath her fingernails. "Doctor," Poirot addressed her with respectful formality, "you handled the poker to close the window, yes? Yet these nails betray the presence of soil, and not the garden earth, but dust of the vellum racks in the library. You retrieved something from those shelves, did you not?" Dr. Linden's lips parted in a faint gasp. Her composure wavered for a heartbeat before she nodded and lowered her eyes. Poirot's gaze drifted to Colonel Fitzwilliam, who stood with arms crossed, his scarred cheek taut. "Colonel, you protested your innocence most vehemently when questioned by the inspector, yet at the moment of the crime you were seen pacing in the billiard room, as attested by the footman." He waited, but the colonel's expression remained tight-lipped. "A restless night, monsieur," the colonel replied evenly. "One paces when one's mind is troubled." "True," Poirot conceded. "Yet pacing may also serve to test one's alibi." He offered a small, inscrutable smile. He then addressed Miss Eleanor Radcliffe, whose pale countenance had grown even paler under his scrutiny. "Mademoiselle," Poirot intoned softly, "you claim to have departed and returned unseen. Yet your shoes bear not a single droplet of rain. The path is sodden. Footprints lead directly to the window-sill. How did you approach without crossing the wet lawns?" Eleanor swallowed visibly. Her gaze flickered toward the French doors, then returned to Poirot. "I wore overshoes, monsieur. I changed them at the porch." "Ah!" Poirot exclaimed, raising a gloved finger. "Overshoes! Yet I find none among the footwear by the entrance. Curious." Pemberton, the solicitor, adjusted his spectacles and cleared his throat. "I provided Miss Radcliffe with her garments. Perhaps the overshoes were misplaced." Poirot inclined his head. "A plausible explanation, but we shall verify." Finally, Poirot's attention settled on Jameson, the valet, who had grown conspicuously rigid. "Jameson," Poirot said, "you served the wine in the study last evening. The decanter bears smudges of a dark residue. Tincture of opium, perhaps? A sedative far stronger than your quarter-grain dosage would permit." Jameson's face paled. His lip trembled. I meant only to soothe his headaches." "Indeed," Poirot murmured. "But soothing need not prove fatal." At this, the assembled company exchanged glances of mingled shock and confusion. Poirot folded his arms and regarded them coolly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I have my impressions. The official theory that Lord Ashcombe simply collapsed under the influence of sedative is inadequate. The shattered shredder, the forced window, the discrepancy in perfume, The soil on the doctor's nails, the absent overshows, the potent drug residue, all point to a crime far more elaborate. He paused, allowing the magnitude of his declaration to sink in. We proceed from this moment under a new hypothesis. This was neither accident nor impulse, but deed of design. With that, he tapped his cane on the parquet. Inspector Morton, kindly ensure the study remains untouched. Hastings, I require your presence to review the ledger fragments. Mesdames et messieurs, you shall remain in this room until I summon each of you for further inquiry. As the inspector issued his orders, I caught Poirot's eye. That glittering look, half amusement, half resolve, promised that the official investigation's shortcomings would soon be laid bare. Thus did Poirot's grand entrance not merely signal his arrival, but herald the unraveling of every pretense. Chapter 5. Initial interviews begin. Late afternoon found the library's shutters drawn against the gathering dusk, the tall windows casting narrow bands of fading light across the scattered ledger fragments. Inspector Morton and 2 constables stood by the door, permitting only one visitor at a time. I perched on a velvet settee as Poirot, with his impeccable calm, summoned the first interviewee. Lady Helena. Poirot called, and the Countess entered, her expression composed, though her eyelids quivered. He gestured to a Windsor chair. She seated herself, clutching a handkerchief in both hands. Lady Helena, you told us of your quarrel with Lord Ashcombe over the hunting lodge sale. Did your husband ever mention additional creditors beyond the ledgers? Poirot asked, steepling his fingers. She hesitated. He alluded to a silent partner, someone who wished to remain anonymous. He feared exposure. She dabbed at her eyes, but he named no one. Silent partners often remain silent for a reason, Poirot mused. When was the last time you saw this partner's presence, financial or otherwise, reflected in any correspondence? She drew a breath. I discovered a letter addressed to him in cipher, hidden beneath his writing desk. I destroyed it. I feared the contents would wound his pride. Her voice faltered. I burned it in the hearth. Poirot's mustache quivered. You burn a letter in cipher. Admirable discretion, yet unfortunate that its contents now escape us. He studied her, then rose. Thank you, Lady Helena. You may go. As she departed, I noted Poirot's thoughtful frown. He did not mention the cipher. I whispered. Poirot tapped his chin. No, Hastings, and yet Lady Helena burned it. Perhaps to protect him, perhaps to protect herself. He motioned to the door, admitting Colonel Fitzwilliam next. The colonel entered in his military bearing, scarf flame in the low light. He straightened as Poirot seated himself behind the desk. Colonel, Poirot began, you lost £20,000 on a boarded mine venture. Did Lord Ashcombe ever express doubt about the mine's profitability? The colonel's jaw stiffened. He hired an engineer to survey the site. The report was due on Tuesday, yet he destroyed it rather than show me. He glared. He said the mine held nothing but sand. Poirot produced a sheet of paper. This, Hastings, is a carbon copy of the engineer's invoice. 300 guineas. I found it in Lady Helena's sewing box. He slid it across. Why dispose of the engineer's report, yet preserve the invoice? The colonel's mouth twitched. He paid for discretion, he growled, rising. He paid to bury the truth. With a curt nod, he left. Ah, Poirot said, folding his hands. He did not deny the existence of a report, only its contents. Red flag, mon ami. I watched the colonel's retreating back. Wounded pride or a deeper motive? Soon after, Dr. Beatrice Linden glided in, her demeanor composed but reserved. Poirot invited her to sit. Doctor, you administered a sedative stronger than standard. You claim ignorance of its potency. He laid out 2 small vials, one labeled prescription, the other anonymous. Which did you use? She inhaled sharply. The first, she said, pointing. I have no knowledge of the second. Poirot held the anonymous vial aloft, yet traces of its contents marked the decanter. This vial arrived by hand at the front door 2 nights ago. He paused. Can you account for its delivery? Dr. Linden shook her head. I did not request it. I found on my desk this morning. An unsolicited gift, Poirot mused, or a planted clue. He stood. Merci, doctor. The door opened again to admit Miss Eleanor Radcliffe, whose complexion had drained to the palest cream. Poirot offered her a cordial. Mademoiselle, he said gently, you brought overshows that have not been found. Did you leave them elsewhere? She sipped, shaking. I removed them by the garden gate and brought only my indoor slippers to the front. Poirot tapped his cane. Yet your slippers bear no mud, and the soles are immaculate. He examined her feet. These are new, I noticed yesterday. Purchased, perhaps, within the last week. She swallowed. They were a gift from Lord Ashcombe on my arrival. Poirot inclined his head. A charitable gift. But if so, why wear old shoes for the garden crossing? She appeared unable to reply. Poirot's gaze softened. You need not fear. We continue. She left, unsteady but unbroken. Madame Winifred Cartwright, in her prim black gown, hovered by the door. Poirot beckoned. Madame Cartwright, you mistook the shredder for thunder. Yet you are hard of hearing. Did you notice any human voice? The companion nodded. I thought I heard a whisper, a man's voice saying, it must be done tonight. Poirot's eyes lit. A whisper, and in the storm, you could still discern those words. Yes, she said. He spoke close to the machine. Poirot made a rapid note. Thank you, Madame Cartwright. She curtsied and departed. Finally, Jameson appeared, uniform pristine, but posture slack. Poirot motioned him in. Jameson, he said in gentle tones, you served wine containing opium tincture. I asked, did you taste the blend yourself? Jameson's shoulders slumped. I did, monsieur. I thought it mild. Yet you did not taste it after service? No, monsieur, I did not. Poirot folded his hands. You feared your master's wrath. A plausible fear. He paused. Did you observe anyone enter the pantry after you decanted the wine? Jameson's face blanched. I thought I heard footsteps. I left the door ajar. Poirot stood and patted his shoulder. Merci, Jameson. That will do. The valet withdrew. Poirot sank into the chair, folding his legs. Hastings, we have much to consider. Secret ciphers, destroyed reports, unrequested vials, whispered declarations. Each motive now interweaves with opportunity. He steepled his fingers. Yet the true culprit will falter where we lay our final trap. I rose at his signal. As the last candle guttered, I understood that these initial interviews had illuminated every suspect's vulnerabilities. Yet none revealed guilt outright. The web of deceit had tightened. The hour of revelation drew near. Chapter 6. The First False Lead. By the following morning, the household buzzed with hushed excitement and anxious anticipation. Inspector Morton, emboldened by the fragments of evidence unearthed, announced to the assembled suspects that a breakthrough had emerged. The official theory, he declared, pointed squarely to Colonel Fitzwilliam. The room erupted into startled murmurs, and I watched Poirot's inscrutable expression as the colonel was summoned. In the library, the colonel stood with rigid dignity, though his scarred cheek paled beneath the gaslight. Inspector Morton produced a slender leather pouch. Monsieur Poirot, Hastings, we had discovered these items hidden behind a loose panel in the billiard room. He opened the pouch to reveal an ornate revolver, still warm to the touch, and a single Cuban cigar band bearing the initials R.A. for many present. The evidence felt incontrovertible. Colonel Fitzwilliam's jaw clenched. I admit I carried a firearm at night, on account of the storm and the drive home, but I never discharged it within the house. He squared his shoulders. That cigar band? I found it in the study and pocketed it. It belonged to Lord Ashcombe. I intended to return it to the smoking tray. Inspector Morton eyed the colonel with triumph. Yet the revolver's barrel bears traces of the same opium tincture found in the wine decanter. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The colonel's camouflage of military honor crumbled. I did not realize poisoning would adhere to metal. His voice faltered. Poirot stepped forward, cane tapping lightly. A most compelling discovery, Inspector. Yet, permit me a moment of reflection. He knelt to examine the revolver, lifting it with a white-gloved hand. The bore was clean, save for a faint oily residue. He then tapped the cigar band. "Observe, Hastings. The band is pristine. No ash, no singeing. A curious feature, considering Colonel Fitzwilliam is an avid smoker." Colonel Fitzwilliam's lip curled. I had not yet lit it. Poirot's eyes flicked to the inspector. "Mon cher Morton, may I suggest that our culprit, knowing this investigation would focus on opium traces, planted the revolver to mislead us? The weapon is too conveniently located." He tapped the barrel. "Moreover, a revolver would require extraction of a spent cartridge or wrist jamming, yet none was found." Inspector Morton frowned. "Nevertheless, the opium residue matches our tincture. Only if one applied it directly," Poirot replied. He dabbed at the metal with a swab. "A more telling discrepancy. The residue's composition contains medicinal-grade morphine, not the tincture of opium itself. Our study yielded no morphine, only tincture." He rose, handing the swab to Morton. "This suggests the revolver was tainted after the fact." The inspector's brow furrowed. "So you disagree?" Poirot inclined his head. "Entirely. This, monsieur, is a bluff." He turned to Colonel Fitzwilliam. "You may depart, Colonel, and do refrain from carrying weapons indoors." The colonel, visibly relieved yet still dignified, bowed stiffly and left the room. Outside, the suspects exchanged anxious glances. Inspector Morton cleared his throat. "Well, then, who else but Colonel Fitzwilliam can we suspect?" His question hung unanswered. That afternoon, word circulated that the colonel's arrest was imminent, until Poirot's careful dissection of the evidence deflated the theory entirely. The household settled into a tense quiet, as if fearing the next shoe to drop. I joined Poirot in the study, where he examined the shredded ledger fragments under a brass reading lamp. "Hastings," he said softly, "the inspector's eagerness has provided us with a false lead, one designed to rally the household under a semblance of progress." He tapped the fragments. "But observe, these scraps speak of discreet payments to an unnamed agent, not a mine engineer or physician. Our culprit sought records of money transfers, not a firearm." I frowned. "Then why plant the revolver? To suggest an act of desperation?" "Exactly." Poirot leaned back, fingers steepled. "By introducing a weapon bearing the wrong residue, the murderer hoped to send us after Colonel Fitzwilliam and buy time. Yet this ruse reveals arrogance, the belief that only one mind can comprehend the deceit." He paused, raising a slender finger. "Note, too, that the Cuban cigar band was untouched by heat, a detail overlooked by all but myself. Our killer never intended to smoke it. It was a token, a signature left deliberately. The initials R.A. point to Lord Ashcombe, but charging Colonel Fitzwilliam with tampering allows a murderer to weave a new narrative. I considered this. So the real culprit remains free, confident that the inspector's theories shield him. Just so. Poirot closed the ledger fragments into a small leather folder. The first false lead has passed. Now, MES Amos, we must look deeper, beyond opium and firearms, to the subtle undercurrents of motive. Our next interviews will focus not on violence, but on opportunity and alibi. As we left the study, I noticed the butler's eyes on us, wide, unreadable. Upstairs, the rain had ceased, leaving the ground slick and silent. Somewhere among us lay the true criminal, having observed the colonel's fall from suspicion. And in that moment, I understood that our investigation had become a grander chess game, one in which each misstep, each misdirection, carried immense consequence. But Poirot, calm as ever, moved forward with unshaken resolve, ready to outmaneuver the murderer's cunning designs. Chapter 7. The Psychological Game. The following evening, the grand drawing room assumed the guise of a theater of minds. Gaslights flickered as an autumn breeze whispered through partially closed shutters. Upon a low mahogany table sat a tray bearing a handwritten note, an invented communique, ostensibly from Lord Ashcombe, instructing his secret partner to meet that very night in conservatory. Poirot had composed it himself, knowing that the sight of those words would prod the guilty conscience. One by one, the suspects were invited into the room, under the pretense of a joint reading of new instructions from the victim. Inspector Morton presided at the far end, while I hovered near Poirot, fascinated by the detective's game. First to enter was Miss Eleanor Radcliffe. Her pale face drained further at the note. Poirot offered her the slip of paper. "Mademoiselle, you claim to have been absent when this was drafted," he said softly. "Yet your name appears as custodian of all household correspondence in November's estate ledger." He allowed the silence to settle, watching her fingers tremble. I do not know," Eleanor stammered, eyes darting. "I signed nothing." She swallowed, voice barely audible. "Perhaps someone forged my signature." Poirot inclined his head. A possibility. But why forge it to implicate oneself? He folded the paper and pocketed it. "Whodunit's nerve use, mademoiselle. Nerves betray the guilty." Eleanor fled the room with downcast eyes. Next came Colonel Fitzwilliam, determined to prove his innocence. Poirot extended the note to him. "Colonel, you pride yourself on honoring correspondence. Did you write this?" The colonel's steely gaze met Poirot's. "Absolutely not." He snapped the note away. "I would not stoop to such secrecy." His voice wavered only for an instant. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Yet your glove smelled of cigar smoke when you entered the study earlier. Cigars you claim not to have smoked. Would you also feign ignorance of your own handwriting?" The colonel flushed, thrust the paper back, and strode out. Dr. Beatrice Linden arrived next, composed but wary. She accepted the note with cool detachment. "A private message," she mused. "Lord Ashcombe never entrusted me with such matters." She frowned at the handwriting, tracing its curves with a slender finger. Poirot observed her closely. "You recognize the script, Doctor?" he inquired. Her lashes fluttered. "It's too ornate, unlike my clerk's," she replied. "I cannot place it." A flicker of relief crossed her features when she realized Poirot expected no answer. She departed quietly. Inspector Morton called in Pemberton, the solicitor, who approached with reserve. Poirot handed him the note. "Monsieur Pemberton, you oversee all legal drafts for Lord Ashcombe. Does this bear the seal of his counsel?" Pemberton peered at the paper. "It lacks the proper watermark," he said. "I never use such paper." His calm reply, however, was undercut by a quick swallow. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, yet this paper came from the solicitor's office, left in your antechamber for revision." He tapped the note. "But you deny it. Curious." Pemberton stiffened, lips pressed tight, and retreated. Finally, Lady Helena Ashcombe entered, regal yet unsteady. Poirot placed a note before her. "Lady Helena, as lady of the manor, would you read this to your late husband's partner?" She scooped up the paper, hands quivering. "My husband never spoke of a partner," she said. "This is madness." Her composure cracked. Tears brimmed. She pressed a hand to her heart. Poirot's tone remained gentle. "Madam, your agitation is natural, yet I observe you breathe more rapidly, as though expecting someone to arrive." "Who?" Lady Helena gasped. I cannot say." She folded the note and let it slip from her fingers. With each reaction, Poirot's triumphant scrutiny grew. He permitted no question of their innocence or guilt, only the unveiling of their inner turmoil. Finally, he dismissed them to await his next summons and turned to me. "Hastings, note these reactions." Miss Radcliffe's shame, the colonel's misplaced pride, the doctor's guarded relief, the solicitor's dry throat, and Lady Helena's panicked anticipation. Each response reveals how close the culprit stands to exposure. I frowned. "But whom do you suspect, Poirot?" He tapped his temple. "Patience, mon ami. The murderer fears discovery, and yet craves the thrill of power. By provoking emotional tremors, we force the guilty to betray their own duplicity." He paused, gathering the discarded note. "Tomorrow we press further. For tonight, the psychological game has only just begun." As we left the room, I sensed the servants peering anxiously from the corridors. In the hush of the storm-driven night, Poirot's methods had struck true. Beneath each mask, a flicker of guilt lay waiting to be fanned into confession. But the final truth still lay hidden, waiting for the next move in this silent duel of minds. Chapter 8. A Secondary Mystery. It was near midnight when the household's uneasy vigilance was shattered by a tremor of alarm. I had retired to my chambers, penning notes on Poirot's insights, when a sudden knock set me hurrying to the corridor. There, the head butler, Harrison, awaited with ashen face. "Monsieur Hastings, Monsieur Poirot, there's been another incident in the study." Together we crossed the silent hall to the scene of the original crime. The library door stood ajar, and within, the coroner's assistants gathered around the mahogany desk, whispering in hushed confusion. Poirot entered with measured steps, his cane tapping once, a metronome of calm. "What has occurred?" he asked, voice unruffled. Harrison bowed. "The codicil to Lord Ashcombe's will, prepared just days ago, has vanished." He motioned to a scattering of paper fragments on the floor. "Miss Eleanor Radcliffe discovered the empty envelope this evening." Poirot knelt by the desk, gathering the fragments. I peered at the fine cream paper, trimmed with a gilt border. Only a few torn edges remained. "So," Poirot murmured, "our murderer now pursues not only concealment but erasure of legal intent." He studied the stump of a thin envelope. Note how the flap was cut swiftly, without care for preservation. No shredder this time. Someone desired the codicil intact. I glanced toward the shelves. On the lectern lay an iron-bound volume, its pages splayed open. 2 chapters earlier, I had seen Miss Cartwright peruse this very book. Now, as I stepped closer, I noticed a folded sheet tucked between the pages. Poirot followed my gaze. Without a word, he reached for the sheet, a guest list for a secret society known as the Raven Club, to which Lord Ashcombe had belonged. The list bore names I recognized, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Dr. Linden, and Pemberton among them. Yet one name, obscured by a coffee stain, remained illegible. He handed the list to Inspector Morton. "A clandestine meeting," Poirot said, "but if the codicil favored Lady Helena and disinherited other members, then its disappearance benefits several." Morton frowned, scanning the sheet. "But why remove the codicil tonight?" "To delay the inevitable," Poirot answered. He tapped a fragment in his palm. "Without this document, the will cannot be read. The family fortune remains in limbo, preserving the status quo, and the murderer's interests." As we spoke, a sudden clatter from the paneled alcove drew our attention. The portrait of Lord Ashcombe's grandfather, in heavy gilt frame, swung inward, as if on a hinge, revealing a small recess. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its lock broken. Poirot's eyes lit. "And here we have a hidden journal, another secret unveiled." He opened it carefully. "This contains personal reflections, a confession, perhaps, written by Lord Ashcombe. Look here." He pointed to a page where the ink had been recently smeared. The passage enumerated suspicious payments to the Raven Club's coffers, accompanied by cryptic references to debts of honor and severed ties. I leaned in. The codicil was to be read alongside these journal entries, I suspect. Together they would indict the club's members. Poirot nodded. "Precisely. Our culprit now seeks to obliterate both legal and personal records. The dual crimes, murder and the secondary mystery, serve a single purpose: protection of clandestine alliances." He closed the journal and pocketed it. "We must recover the codicil to restore the threads of motive." Suddenly, a soft sob echoed from the doorway. Lady Helena stood there, trembling, her gown dusted with library dust. "My codicil," she whispered. "I entrusted it only to my private box, under the grandfather clock." She pointed as though uncertain of her own words. Poirot's brow arched. "Your private box within the clock case, an ingenious hiding place. Yet it has been compromised." He knelt to examine the clock's base. "See here, with shavings and scratch marks." The panel was pried open. Lady Helena closed her eyes, as if resolving her grief into steel. "I should have known. Someone followed me into the library and seized it." Poirot rose, addressing us all. "The secondary mystery teaches us that our culprit is not content with one crime. They move boldly to shape the aftermath. Now they possess the codicil, and perhaps the journal's missing passages." He tapped his temple. "Yet the fragments of the envelope bear a watermark exclusive to Lord Ashcombe's stationery. Only one person had routine access, his solicitor, Pemberton." A collective murmur rippled through the assembly. Pemberton stared at the floor, spectacles slipping. Inspector Morton advanced. Monsieur Pemberton. With respect, may we review your papers? Pemberton's voice quavered. I will cooperate fully. He stepped forward, adjusting his coat. Poirot watched him narrowly. As the solicitor moved toward the desk, I caught Poirot's eye. His subtle nod conveyed agreement. The hunt for the codicil would center on Pemberton's chambers. Yet I sensed the detective's strategy would extend beyond mere retrieval. He would lay another trap, one invisible to all but the most vigilant. In the hush that followed, the study's shadows deepened. The secondary mystery had opened a new chapter in our investigation, entwining legal intrigue with mortal danger. And as the night pressed on, I realized that the layers of deception grew ever more intricate, requiring far more than brute force or rash conjecture to unravel. Only Poirot's singular insight could guide us through this labyrinth of secrets. Chapter 9. Hidden Connections. The dawning daylight filtered to the library's tall windows as Poirot convened a private assembly of the principal suspects. Under his directive, they met in the conservatory, whose glass panes framed the brightening garden, incongruous to the heavy atmosphere within. Inspector Morton observed from the doorway, leaving Poirot and Hastings to conduct the inquiry. Poirot opened a leather folio and revealed a collection of letters and receipts he had quietly gathered. Mess Amos, he began, our investigation now turns to the web of relationships binding each of you to Lord Ashcombe and to one another. He extracted a folded document. First, Miss Radcliffe, this letter from your Edinburgh tutor confirms financial sponsorship from Lord Ashcombe, and yet he tapped the paper. Your allowance had been suspended without warning. He allowed a moment for her to absorb the implication. Your financial dependency placed you in a precarious position. Eleanor's eyes flickered with shame. I pleaded for reinstatement of my funds, but he refused. I felt betrayed. She lowered her gaze, lips pressed tight. Poirot's gaze shifted to Colonel Fitzwilliam, who stood at the table's far end. Colonel, you invested heavily in the South African mine venture, yet correspondence shows Lord Ashcombe, as silent partner, funded your entire share. Without his backing, your entire fortune evaporates. The colonel's jaw clenched, but he uttered nothing. Poirot then turned to Dr. Linden. Doctor, your professional reports to the club reveal that you and Lord Ashcombe collaborated on unorthodox treatments, for which he compensated you generously. Yet this check, he held up a slip bearing Dr. Linden's signature, has been cashed only once. The second payment went unclaimed. He let the revelation hang between them. Dr. Linden's composure wavered. I was away. I did not collect it. Perhaps, Poirot conceded, or perhaps someone intercepted it. Next was Mr. Pemberton, whose spectacles glinted in the soft light. Solicitor, you advised Lord Ashcombe on his will, guided investments, and handled all club finances. Yet I discovered discrepancies in the Raven Club's treasurer's ledger. Entries shifted, sums unaccounted for. He pressed a page of figures toward Pemberton. You therefore held power over both legal and monetary outcomes. Pemberton's lip quivered. The club's accounts are my responsibility, but tampering? I would never. He trailed off beneath Poirot's unblinking stare. Finally, Lady Helena, draped in mourning black, appeared pale but dignified. Poirot produced a small crimson letter, folded with meticulous care. My lady, this is from your longtime friend, the Marchioness of Kilkenny. It thanks you for securing Lady Ashcombe's favor in club elections, help that yielded personal influence. Lady Helena's eyes widened. I only wish to protect my husband's interests. Poirot nodded. Protection, yes, but it also created obligations. The Marchioness's request for a loan of £5,000 remains unfulfilled. Your refusal, prompted by your quarrel, bred resentment. He paused, then surveyed the group. Thus we see, Miss Radcliffe depended on allowance, Colonel Fitzwilliam on funding, Dr. Linden on compensation, Pemberton on authority, and Lady Helena on influence. Each relationship was not merely incidental, but central to your fortunes. A hush fell. Poirot raised a slender finger. Now let us consider the ties among you. He turned to Eleanor. Miss Radcliffe, you socialize most with Dr. Linden on philanthropic ventures. Yet your charitable dinners never mention the Marchioness. Eleanor's brow furrowed. I did not wish to impose upon my aunt's standing. Poirot nodded. Nevertheless, Dr. Linden extended compliments to your niece's status, perhaps to curry favor with Lady Helena. He cast his gaze on the doctor. Is it not so? Dr. Linden hesitated, then inclined her head. I admired Miss Radcliffe's dedication, and sought Lady Helena's patronage to support my clinic. Patronage, Poirot repeated. A mutual advantage, yes? He then addressed Colonel Fitzwilliam and Pemberton. Gentlemen, your interactions were equally intertwined. Colonel, you consulted with Mr. Pemberton on your legal standing in the partnership. Mr. Pemberton, you offered advice on restructuring Colonel Fitzwilliam's debts. Yet your personal letters reveal frustration when the colonel balked at your proposed rates. The colonel's scar twitched. Pemberton's grasp tightened on his spectacles. Both remained silent. Poirot folded his hands. Finally, Lady Helena, you sought Dr. Linden's medicinal expertise to manage stress while advising Miss Radcliffe on social graces, creating a triad of influence, financial, medical, and social. He rested his gaze on each. No one acted in isolation. The Raven Club's shadowy network bound you all together. He rose, voice soft yet resolute. Hidden connections reveal shared interests and shared motives, yet they also provide opportunities for collusion and betrayal. The murderer capitalized on these interdependencies, exploiting loyalty and resentment alike. Inspector Morton stepped forward. Monsieur Poirot, what is your conclusion? Poirot folded the folio. We have mapped the web. The next step is to observe the interplay of alliances under controlled provocation. He turned to the suspects. Mesdames et messieurs, you will return to the drawing room. We shall proceed tomorrow with targeted questioning. Focus not on individual guilt, but on the fractures between you. As the suspect departed, I caught Poirot's eye. His expression was serene, yet charged with anticipation. The tangled threads now lay bare. The killer's pattern would surface not in isolation, but in the network of trust and treachery. And in that network, Hastings, I sensed, lay the key to unmasking the murderer. Chapter 10, Poirot's Secret Clue. Late that night, when the manor had surrendered to silence and only the watchful moonlight illuminated the corridors, Poirot beckoned me to the study for a private consultation. The scattered fragments of ledger, codicil envelope, and journal lay before him beneath the amber glow of a single lamp. His face betrayed no hint of triumph, yet I sensed he clutched a small revelation that would change everything. Hastings, he began in a low voice, we have heretofore pursued the grand currents of motive and opportunity, but it is in the smallest eddies where the true course of this crime is revealed. He extended a slender leather tray containing a single scrap of the glove box liner, its delicate stitching undone in one corner. Recall this fragment, dredged from the gravel outside the Bentley. He held it aloft, the lamp catching its gilt-embossed edge. I nodded, remembering how we first examined that ribbon of leather. The liner was bespoke, matching Lord Ashcombe's interior. You said someone tore it deliberately. Indeed, Poirot replied. He placed a fragment beside a similarly sized scrap from the console's center armrest, stained faintly with tobacco ash. The two pieces almost, but crucially did not, align. Poirot tapped his cane softly. Observe! Hastings! The stitching patterns differ. One uses an overcast stitch, the other a saddle stitch. I leaned closer. Different seamsters, perhaps from different workshops? Precisely. Poirot's eyes gleamed. But attention to detail is essential. The armrest cover, stitched by Fournier's London atelier, employs a saddle stitch exclusively. The glove box liner, however, was ordered separately from Pemberton's private upholsterer. Yet here we find a fragment from the glove box employing Fournier's stitch, an impossibility unless someone switched covers. My brow furrowed. So someone replaced the glove box liner with a near-identical piece to conceal a tool, or to conceal evidence, or to stage a theft. Poirot tapped the fragments together. Our murderer removed the genuine liner, tore the replacement in process, then planted a stray fragment outside to mimic a frantic search. But the replacement stitching betrays the deception. He set the tray aside and produced a torn fragment of the codicil envelope. Holding it to light, he revealed a faint watermark, the Ashcombe family crest, upside down. Another inconsistency. Good stationery, yet inverted. Only one person ever handled these sheets long enough to bend them reflexively, Mr. Pemberton, when sealing documents. Poirot paused, letting the way that fact settle. I traced the watermark with my fingertip, but you have said nothing publicly. Patience, mon ami. Poirot folded the envelope fragment and placed it with the leather pieces. Now, the journal. He turned the brittle pages to the smeared passage we found in the secret recess. The smudge, I discovered, is not fresh ink, but archival sealing wax, one of 3 distinct hues used in our household. Crimson for family matters, black for secret society correspondence, and amber for routine business. He pressed 2 fingers to the wax smear. This smear is amber, yet the entry concerns the Raven Club's private ledgers. Whoever removed these pages intended to obscure the society's involvement while leaving the family's narrative intact. He tapped the journal spine. An audacious misdirection. Poirot rose and paced the mantel, where the mantel clock chimed softly. The critical realization, Hastings, is that our culprit required not only to eliminate incriminating documents, but also to orchestrate false clues in multiple domains: automotive, legal, personal. Such meticulous layering demands both intimate access and confidence in evading detection. I watched him assemble the fragments into neat piles. And this secret clue, the stitching, remains unknown to all but us. He allowed himself a thin smile. Yes, for the moment, it is our advantage. Tomorrow, when we confront Mr. Pemberton, and only then, this revelation will strike at the heart of his duplicity. But we must wait until he believes himself secure. He seated himself, folding his legs. Hastings, you have observed that our investigation has repeatedly uncovered evidence planted to mislead. Now we hold the keystone that fits no false arch. We shall lean upon it when the time is ripe. I sat beside him, the hush of the night pressing in. Do you believe the solicitor is the murderer, Poirot? He tapped his temple. I believe he is more than solicitor. He is executor of fortunes and confidant of secrets. But guilt requires both motive and opportunity. Tomorrow, we shall probe his schedule at the precise moment of the crime. Until then, we guard our secret clue as a silent sentinel. The clock struck 2. Poirot extinguished the lamp and rose. Rest, Hastings. Tomorrow we unmask the dealer in deceit. As I retraced my steps down the dark corridor, I held the image of those mismatched stitches in my mind, a minute inconsistency destined to topple a grand facade. And I knew that when Poirot finally revealed a secret clue, the murderer's carefully constructed world would shatter like thin leather under pressure. Chapter 11. Tensions rise. The morning sun found the household unusually restless. Whispered conversations drifted through the corridors as Mrs. Harrison fussed over the drawing-room derangements. Poirot moved among the suspects with quiet authority, ready to observe the strain that had been fermenting since our last discovery. I trailed him, notebook in hand, prepared for the interplay that would bring us one step closer to the truth. Our first gathering convened in the music room, where a grand piano stood silent beneath its dust cover. The suspects took their places on stiff chairs arrayed in a semicircle. Miss Radcliffe by the window, Colonel Fitzwilliam near the piano, Dr. Linden beside Lady Helena, and Pemberton nearest the door. Inspector Morton hovered at the rear, awaiting Poirot's signal. Standing before them, Poirot addressed the group in measured tones. Mesdames et messieurs, last night's revelation compels us to examine your alibis more closely. We must revisit the timeline of events between 10 o'clock and midnight. He paused, letting his words settle. With a gentle nod, he turned to Eleanor. Mademoiselle Radcliffe, you told us you slipped through the garden at 11:30 to return after your departure. Yet the gardener, Mr. Thompson, states he heard footsteps on the terrace at precisely 11:17. How do you explain this discrepancy? Eleanor's lips parted and her delicate form shivered. I might have misread my watch. It was poor light. She forced a polite curtsy, but her voice trembled. I did not wish to deceive Monsieur Poirot. Time is currency in an investigation, Poirot observed. One cannot misplace it so freely. He made a note. Eleanor glanced at the piano, then down at her hands. Next, Poirot faced Colonel Fitzwilliam. Colonel, you claim to have been in the billiard room, pacing, until the storm's fiercest gust lulled you to retreat indoors. Yet the footman heard the billiard balls strike pockets at 11:25. You were alone. Who could test your alibi? The colonel's scar flickered as he straightened. I admit, he said slowly, I struck a solitary pool in frustration. I meant no deceit. His steely voice wavered only briefly. I then returned to the corridor, where I encountered Dr. Linden. His gaze shifted toward her. Dr. Linden's expression remained calm, but guarded. Poirot turned to her. Doctor, you accompanied the colonel briefly, then left to close the study window at 11:40. Yet the window latch was still moist when I examined it at midnight. Explain the delay. She inhaled, her composure unbroken. The sash was stuck. I struggled to lift it. The rain had swollen the wood. I did not notice the moisture until later. She pressed her fingertips together. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Struggles leave marks and require time. Then from the study, you passed through the library to retrieve your medical bag. Who else saw you? Dr. Linden glanced at Lady Helena, who sat motionless, hands clasped. The housemaid glimpsed me at 11:48. She dipped her head. Lady Helena Ashcombe, summoned next, rose with gentle dignity. As hostess, I walked the halls seeking calm for our guests, she explained. I passed Miss Radcliffe at the staircase landing at 11:20. She turned to Eleanor. Was that not so? Eleanor's gaze flickered. Yes, though I thought it closer to 11. Poirot watched them both. Two watches now challenged. It appears time, like memory, is malleable under stress. He tapped his cane. Yet the sequence remains vital. Lady Helena, after meeting Miss Radcliffe, you claim to have checked on your husband's journal in the library at 11:30. However, the candle stub at his desk burned down completely only by 11:50, according to the butler's log. Did you refresh the flame? Lady Helena's nostrils flared. I might have trimmed the wick to steady the candle. Her admission hung heavy in the air. Poirot turned to Pemberton, who sat unmoving, spectacles low. Mr. Pemberton, you withdrew to your office to consult the club's records at 11:35. Yet the Raven Club ledger bears your fingerprints on an entry dated the following day at 11:42. He slid the leather-bound ledger to Pemberton. Explain how you accessed tomorrow's page before the codicil's disappearance. Pemberton's hand trembled as he opened the ledger. I predated an amendment, he stammered. I meant only prepare for today's meeting. His voice trailed off as Poirot's gaze sharpened. Across the room, Colonel Fitzwilliam exhaled sharply. Dr. Linden's lips pressed in. Lady Helena's cheeks flushed. Miss Radcliffe blinked rapidly. Each caught the implication. A planned entry, a manipulated timeline, a deliberate misstep. Poirot folded his hands and addressed them all. You see, MES Amos, the strands of time have frayed. Each alibi contains a thread of uncertainty. Sometimes a watch misread. Sometimes a ledger predated. Sometimes a candle tended. These small deviations betray not mere oversight, but orchestration. He paused, letting their tension mount. Inspector Morton stepped forward. Monsieur Poirot, you suggest collusion? Poirot inclined his head. Collusion or calculated spontaneity. The criminal mind adapts. But we shall test these faltering timelines tomorrow by recreating the hall's movements under controlled conditions. As the session ended, the suspect departed in silence, their confidence shaken. I remained with Poirot, who scribbled notes by the window. The morning light caught the constellations of ink on his pad, mirroring the tangled connections we had just unraveled. Hastings, he said quietly, observe how pressure warps truth. The murderer's web strains at the seams when challenged. Tomorrow, we press further, and the culprit's mask will slip. I closed my notebook, feeling the verdict inch closer. In the hush of the music room, I understood that tensions had indeed risen, and that under their weight, the killer's carefully wrought facade would soon crumble. Chapter 12, The Confrontation. That afternoon, Poirot convened the suspects once more in the billiard room, its green baize tables and mirrored walls lending an air of civilized ease. Yet beneath a veneer of civility, Tension crackled like the phantom echo of a lost shot. Inspector Morton and I arrived first, awaiting Poirot's signal as the others filed in, each wearing a mask of polite curiosity. Poirot stood by the central table, hands clasped behind his back. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice poised yet carrying an unmistakable undercurrent of authority. "We have reconstructed the timeline, probed the hidden partnerships, and sifted motives from opportunity. Now, we shall test one final hypothesis." He turned to the butler, Harrison. "Please lay out the letter fragments, the codicil envelope, and the journal." Harrison approached and arranged the items meticulously on a velvet cloth. The mismatched letter pieces, the inverted watermark envelope fragment, and the amber sealing wax smear. Poirot swept his gaze across the assembly. "Each of you has been implicated by circumstance or testimony. Yet only one among you possesses both the intimate access and the audacity to orchestrate these deceptions." He paused. "Let us begin with the leather." He held up the glove box liner fragment. "The stitching here," he tapped it lightly, "is Fournier's saddle stitch, not the overcast stitch of Pemberton's private upholsterer. Mr. Pemberton, you alone control your solicitor's office, which orders bespoke materials exclusively through Fournier." He let the weight of those words hang. Pemberton shifted, spectacles glinting. "Monsieur Poirot, Poirot raised a glove finger. "Permit me to finish." He replaced the fragment and picked up the codicil envelope piece. "Again, this watermark is inverted. Only one person habitually handles the stationery upside down when sealing documents in haste at your desk." He stepped closer to Pemberton. "You were present in the study at midnight under the pretext of reviewing the Raven Club ledger." Pemberton's lips trembled. He glanced at the other suspects, as if seeking sanctuary in their faces. None offered it. Poirot turned to the sealing wax smear. "Lastly, this wax is amber, used for routine business. Yet the journal entry concerned the Raven Club's clandestine activities, customarily sealed in black wax. Only you, monsieur, have the keys to all three seals." At this, Pemberton's facade cracked. His shoulders slumped, and he closed his eyes. You have no proof, only insinuations." Poirot's mustache quivered. "Insinuations, or observations born of careful scrutiny?" He gestured to the fragments. "These minute inconsistencies form a pattern. You replaced the glove box liner to conceal your search for the ledger, shredded the codicil envelope to erase Lady Helena's bequest, and removed the journal passages to hide the club's financial entanglements. Yet in your haste, you overlooked the stitch, the watermark orientation, and the wax hue." A silence thickened the air. Pemberton swallowed and opened his mouth. Instinctively, he reached to smooth his waistcoat, brushing against a neatly folded piece of black wax ribbon, which he promptly withdrew. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "What is it you hold, monsieur?" Pemberton's hand trembled as he unfurled the ribbon, a strip of sealing wax matching precisely the color used by the club. It fell from the recess," he stammered. "Perhaps from the journal." Poirot's lips curved into a thin smile. A convenient explanation. Yet if that ribbon belonged to the journal, it would carry ink impressions from the pages it sealed. This one bears none. Instead, its edges are clipped with the same saddle stitch I described earlier, a stitch not used on any journal, but only on the cover of your private documents. Pemberton's face drained of color. He looked at each suspect in turn. Lady Helena's disdain, Colonel Fitzwilliam's controlled fury, Dr. Linden's measured attachment, Miss Radcliffe's wide-eyed shock. All watched him as though viewing a man revealed in his true form. He dropped the ribbon to the velvet cloth, where its glossy black surface seemed to glisten accusatorily. "Ah," he murmured, voice barely audible. Poirot folded his hands. "Monsieur Pemberton, you believed your station as solicitor and executor of the family's affairs would shield you, yet you underestimated the power of the little gray cells." He turned to the inspector. "Inspector Morton, I believe we have sufficient cause to detain Mr. Pemberton for further questioning." Morton nodded, stepping forward to place a gentle hand on Pemberton's arm. "Sir, you are under suspicion of complicity in Lord Ashcombe's death." Pemberton's knees buckled slightly. He looked at Poirot, eyes pleading. "I only wish to protect them, all of them. The Raven Club's misdeeds, the debts, the betrayals. I thought I could hide the evidence and keep the family from disgrace. Poirot's voice softened, yet remained firm. In doing so, you became judge, jury, and executioner. But justice is not served by concealment, monsieur. As the constables led Pemberton away, the remaining suspects exhaled collectively, some in sorrow, others in relief. The tension that had suffused the room dissipated, like a held breath released. Poirot turned to us. The confrontation yields truth when the guilty cannot maintain their performance under direct scrutiny. He nodded to the inspector. Inspector, secure the solicitor's chambers. We will recover the missing codicil and journal pages. Walking from the billiard room, I placed a hand on Poirot's arm. Remarkable, Poirot. How could you be so certain? He tapped his temple with a smile. The smallest detail, Hastings, the misaligned stitch, revealed all. Always, the devil is in the details. And in this case, so is the salvation of justice. Behind us, Pemberton's footsteps echoed down the corridor, each one carrying the weight of a man unmasked. The confrontation had ended, and with it, the murderer's veil was lifted. Yet the final resolution still awaited us in the codicil's unshredded truth. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape. Night had fallen again over Belgrave Crescent when the tension of the day's revelations gave way to a new urgency. The news that Mr. Pemberton, securely detained in the billiard room's makeshift cell, was no longer to be found within its confines. It was Inspector Morton who summoned Poirot and me to the scene, his face taut with alarm. I left 2 constables on guard, Morton said, pacing before the closed door. They swear he was here a quarter hour ago. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the lamplight. A predictable error, mon ami. When one is desperate, one exploits the predictable. He bowed to one constable. Gentlemen, show us where you positioned yourselves. They pointed to opposite corners, backs turned to the door, rifles resting on their laps. Poirot nodded. Now, he said softly, come with me. He led the way through the silent corridors to the conservatory. There, the greenhouse glass panes shimmered in the moonlight, and the potted palms cast tall shadows. Morton hesitated, but Poirot pushed open the door. Inside lay the first clue, a single black sealing wax ribbon torn in half on the marble floor. The culprit returns to his signature instrument. Poirot observed. He left this when unpicking the lock. He knelt, noting slight abrasions on the rim of the door. See how the wax fragments match those from the studio. No one else could provide such material. He has been here. Morton drew his revolver. He must be somewhere nearby. Poirot traced footprints in the damp earth. The palms had been watered earlier, leaving moisture that captured the tread of fine leather soles. He fled through the Italianate doors to the east terrace. Come, Hastings. We followed the trail into the night, pacing across slick flagstones. A cold breeze carried the distant sound of a motor starting. The garden's rear gate lay ajar, swinging on its hinges. Beyond it, a vintage Humber automobile idled, engine ticking as metal cooled. At last, Poirot murmured, his means of escape. He approached the driver's door, peering through the glass. Inside lay a bag of papers, journal fragments, the codicil envelope, and pages from a Raven Club ledger, all hastily stuffed together. Before we could act, the car door swung open. Pemberton emerged, his coat collar turned up against the wind. In one hand, he clutched the leather portfolio containing the recovered codicil. In the other, he held a slender revolver. Stay back. Pemberton's voice trembled. His facade of calm had crumbled, revealing eyes wild with panic. I will not return to that prison. I will prove I acted for the family's good. Poirot stepped forward, cane tapping once. Monsieur Pemberton, you must cease this, he said quietly. Your flight will only worsen matters. Pemberton's jaw worked. No, they will destroy everything I've tried to save. He brandished a revolver toward the garden wall. Stand aside. Morton repositioned himself, hand on holster. Drop the weapon, Pemberton. It's over. For a tense moment, the wind rustled through the laurels. Pemberton's finger curled on the trigger. I feared the shot would shatter the night's fragile calm. Then, with a strangled cry, he fired, once, into the air. The echo startled birds from their trees. Poirot raised a gloved hand. Monsieur, There is still a way to end this without further bloodshed. His voice was gentle yet unyielding. Return the portfolio and lay down your weapon. Pemberton's breathing rattled. He glanced at the scattered documents on the seat, then at the dark road beyond the gate. His resolve wavered. At last, he lowered the gun, loosening his grip. "Very well," Morton said, stepping forward to relieve him of the weapon. 2 constables appeared, bounding up the terrace steps to secure Pemberton's wrists in handcuffs. Poirot retrieved the portfolio and handed it to me. "Hastings, ensure these pages remain intact." He then turned to Pemberton, who drooped with the weight of defeat. "I understand your desire to protect the family, but secrecy breeds tragedy, monsieur. You compounded one wrong with another." Pemberton's shoulders sagged. He looked at his hands, thick with shaking. "I thought I could contain the scandal." "You endangered lives instead," Poirot replied softly. "Now, at last, we can restore what was lost." He gestured toward the waiting car. "Let's return inside, where justice may take its course." As we led him back through the gate, I noted Pemberton's gaze lingering on the garden. A silent farewell to his ill-fated escape. The storm clouds had passed, and the moon rode high in a clear sky. Yet beneath that silver light, I sensed the darkness of deception yielding to the dawn of truth. In that desperate attempt to escape, our murderer had revealed both his remaining evidence and his final act of hubris. And I knew that when the codicil and journal were reunited, the puzzle's last pieces would slot into place, ushering in the resolution for which Poirot had so patiently prepared. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into place. In the solemn hush of the solicitor's chambers, once Mr. Pemberton's private sanctum, Poirot gathered the recovered fragments upon his writing desk. The fire burned low, casting long shadows over the scattered codicil envelope, the journal's excised pages, and the Raven Club ledger. Inspector Morton and I stood by, each acutely aware that tonight the last barrier between mystery and revelation would fall. Monsieur Poirot, his mustache quivering with quiet excitement, picked up the codicil envelope fragment. "Hastings, observe." He turned the fragment to the light, revealing the inverted family crest. This inversion marked the moment of betrayal. But what completes the image? He slid the fragment across the desk. I watched as he aligned it with the complementary piece we had recovered in the garden shed, where the butler Harrison had found the portfolio. With a gentle click, the 2 pieces meshed, restoring the crest upright. "The envelope is whole once more," Poirot murmured, "and with it, the codicil's text may be read." He unfolded the delicate parchment, letting the gilt border glow in the lamplight. My eyes traced the precise language. Lady Helena Ashcombe appointed as sole heir, with explicit disinheritance of any private associates or secret society members. The document's declarative clarity struck me like a bolt. Pemberton had erased it to preserve his own claim, or that of the Raven Club. Poirot set the codicil aside and reached for the journal's missing pages, preserved now in their pocket. He placed them between the original leaves, completing the sequence. I saw then the critical passage. Lord Ashcombe's confession of coercion. How Pemberton, under the guise of legal counsel, had blackmailed him into financing the club's questionable ventures. The entry concluded with a vow to expose Pemberton's manipulation should my heirs prove unworthy. A tremor of realization passed through me. Poirot these words. He intended to leave the entire estate not to his wife, but to his nephew in America, or perhaps to a trust outside the club's influence. I drew breath. Pemberton destroyed the codicil to block that outcome. Yes, Poirot agreed, and he removed the journal pages to hide the evidence of his blackmail. He tapped the ledger beside him. Yet the ledger itself bears the final piece. The column of clandestine payments, matched by entries in Pemberton's own account books, transactions signed with his unmistakable cipher. He leaned forward, finger tracing the numbers. When we align the payment dates with journal entries, the pattern emerges. Pemberton siphoned funds over 6 months, each sum equal to the club's share of the estate. I felt the room tilt. So the financial motive was the club's preservation, and Pemberton's enrichment? But why risk murder? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Because Lord Ashcombe threatened to disinherit all involved. In that moment, Pemberton chose to silence him. He closed the journal decisively. With the codicil restored and the journal's truth revealed, the final piece falls into place. Opportunity, motive, and means converge in Pemberton's actions. Inspector Morton stepped forward. Monsieur Poirot, with this evidence, we can complete our case. He folded his hands over the codicil. Sir, you now stand convicted not only of document tampering, but of orchestrating the death of Lord Ashcombe. Pemberton, escorted into the chamber, sank into a chair, head bowed. His gaunt face bore the weight of exposure. I served the family, he murmured, voice hollow. The club needed funds. Our traditions required secrecy. I could not bear the thought of public scandal. Poirot regarded him with measured compassion. Monsieur, you place your own ambitions above justice. In doing so, you betrayed both your client and your oath. He paused, then added quietly, Yet now truth prevails. At Poirot's instruction, Morton began reading passages aloud. The codicil's clear bequest, the blackmail entry from the journal, and the ledger's incriminating sums. Each sentence seemed to echo in the stillness, confirming Pemberton's guilt beyond doubt. As the final words drifted into silence, Lady Helena, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Dr. Linden, and Miss Radcliffe filed into the room, drawn by the solemnity of the moment. Each greeted the restored codicil and journal with varied emotion, relief, vindication, sorrow. The Raven Club ledger, once a symbol of their clandestine unity, now lay open as testament to betrayal. Poirot addressed them all. The murderer's design was intricate. Shred the codicil, excise journal passages, plant false clues. Yet the finest deception cannot survive the scrutiny of little gray cells. He turned to the assembled company. Mesdames et messieurs, balance is restored. The estate will pass as Lord Ashcombe intended, and those responsible for his death and deceit will answer for their crimes. In that charged silence, I felt the full weight of Poirot's achievement. The multi-threaded mystery unraveled by a single, decisive alignment of evidence. The final piece, once elusive, now lay at the heart of the truth, and the path to justice lay clear before us. As the chamber emptied and the dawn crept across the windows, I remained by Poirot's side, awed by how the smallest stitch and the subtlest inversion had guided us to this moment, when every strand of mystery wove together into a tapestry of revelation. The final piece had fallen into place. Chapter 15, The Final Gathering. Late that afternoon, the heavy velvet drapes of the drawing room were drawn aside to admit a soft glow of setting sun. The grand space, once charged with suspicion and hushed conversations, now stood poised for its ultimate purpose. Lady Helena, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Dr. Linden, Miss Radcliffe, and even the subdued figure of Mr. Pemberton, escorted by Inspector Morton, assembled along the perimeter, their faces a mixture of apprehension and relief. I took my place beside Monsieur Poirot, whose composed demeanor bespoke both gravity and triumph. Poirot surveyed the company, cane in hand. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice measured, we are met here to witness the culmination of our inquiry. Before us rests both truth and justice, ready to emerge from shadows into light. He gestured to a small walnut table upon which lay 3 items: the restored codicil, the completed pages of Lord Ashcombe's journal, and the Raven Club ledger, now devoid of clandestine erasures. He addressed Lady Helena first, offering the codicil. Lady Helena, you have endured much distress. Your rightful inheritance, as intended by your late husband, is contained herein. She received the parchment with trembling hands, eyes filling with tears. My gratitude to you, Monsieur Poirot, and to the memory of Reginald, she whispered. Poirot inclined his head gravely. We shall shortly allow you to confer with your solicitor, once freed from his self-imposed guilt, to arrange your estate. But first, we must reconstruct the sequence of events for all present. He lifted the journal, holding it like a sacred text. Lord Ashcombe's final confidences exposed the motive behind the crime, discovery of Mr. Pemberton's blackmail of club members, and his manipulation of family funds. He opened the journal to the completed passage and recited in calm, precise tones, "And should my heirs lack honor, I bequeath all the American trust outside their corrupt circle." His voice resonated in the silent room. As he spoke, I noted the subtle tightening of shoulders around the circle, each confronted by the gravity of secret betrayals. Next, Poirot set the journal aside and tapped the ledger. These entries chart payments to Mr. Pemberton. Payments unaccounted for in official club records. They establish not only motive but means. He gestured toward the solicitor. Mr. Pemberton, would you care to explain your signature upon these pages? Pemberton's eyes flickered among the assembled faces. He drew in a ragged breath. I used the club's funds to extract myself from financial ruin, he confessed. When Lord Ashcombe discovered the scheme, he threatened exposure. I panicked, and he trailed off, unable to continue. Poirot let the silence deepen. Then, turning to Colonel Fitzwilliam, he noted, Your investments faltered only after funds were diverted. Had truth prevailed, your share might have been secured, not squandered. The colonel's jaw tightened, but he inclined his head gravely. Poirot then addressed Dr. Linden. Your medical practice, madam, received patronage from Lord Ashcombe, funds misappropriated by Mr. Pemberton. Though unintended, you were drawn into his scheme. She bowed, then straightened as he spoke next. Miss Radcliffe, Poirot said, your stipend was suspended when coffers ran dry. You risked disgrace before these matters came to light. Eleanor's lips quivered, but she met his gaze with quiet dignity. Finally, Poirot faced Lady Helena. Madam, you sought to protect your husband's reputation, even as calamity brewed in secret. Your compassion nearly concealed the very documents that now vindicate you. He paused, letting each confession resonate. Thus we have motive articulated, means disclosed, and opportunity confirmed. He looked past them to the silent Inspector Morton. Inspector, you may now place Mr. Pemberton under formal arrest for the murder of Lord Ashcombe and for document tampering. Morton stepped forward. Mr. Pemberton, you are charged accordingly. 2 constables quietly moved to take Pemberton's arm. Though he bore no weapon now, his shoulders slumped under the weight of exposure. Poirot closed the journal with a gentle click. Mesdames et messieurs, justice is not vengeance, but the restoration of order. Tonight, truth has prevailed. He turned to the others. You may remain here while arrangements are made. Tomorrow, you shall receive counsel on how to rebuild your lives in the light of this ordeal. As the constables led Pemberton away, the assembled guests exhaled, some in relief, others in sorrow. I sensed the room soften, the air grow lighter now that the final gathering had fulfilled its purpose. Lady Helena approached Poirot, offering a fervent handshake. Colonel Fitzwilliam bowed respectfully. Dr. Linden and Miss Radcliffe exchanged grateful glances. Poirot raised his cane in a final salute. And now, Hastings, we await the ultimate resolution. He smiled slightly, as if savoring the satisfaction of a trial long conducted. I closed my notebook, reflecting on how the smallest details, stitch, watermark, wax, had guided us here. The final gathering had not only witnessed confessions, but crystallized the interplay of motives and actions. As the dusk shifted to evening, I knew that tomorrow's reveal would simply affirm the justice already set in motion. Chapter 16, The Reveal. That evening, the drawing room once more served as tribunal and stage. The afternoon's gathering had restored legal order, but the true mechanics of the crime still remained hidden, until Poirot, with his little gray cells aflame, summoned the assembled company back to the scene of their shared ordeal. Lady Helena, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Dr. Linden, and Miss Radcliffe returned, their faces composed yet tinged with apprehension. I took my place beside Inspector Morton, aware that the long-awaited explanation would soon unfold. Monsieur Poirot rose and surveyed the company with solemn gravity. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, we have seen motive means an opportunity established. Yet it is now time to lay bare the precise sequence of actions that extinguished Lord Ashcombe's life, and to expose the mind that orchestrated them. He paused, tapping his cane against the parquet floor. Let us commence, step by step. He addressed Dr. Linden first. You were asked to deliver a mild sedative to your patient, Lord Ashcombe, at 10 o'clock. In the decanter, you placed your prescribed tincture, unaware of any additional ingredient. Poirot held up the empty decanter. Yet at the same hour, someone accessed your supply cabinet, using the master key you entrusted to Mr. Pemberton. He introduced a morphine-rich tincture into the decanter, ensuring a fatal dose. You closed the study window at 11:40, noticing dampness, just after the drug had taken effect. Dr. Linden pressed her lips together, recalling those final seconds. Turning, Poirot faced Colonel Fitzwilliam. While the sedative acted, you paced the billiard room, uncertain of your alibi. Mr. Pemberton's false lead capitalized on this uncertainty, planning a revolver and cigar band to implicate you. He gestured to the fireplace where the poker lay. Yet the true weapon was time and toxin, not gun or blade. Poirot then spoke to Miss Radcliffe. You slipped through the garden at 11:17 to apologize to Lord Ashcombe, unaware that you followed the murderer's own trail. Your new slippers remained immaculate because you had changed them at the porch, prepared by Pemberton, who needed you to appear innocent of muddy footprints while ensuring his own escape route remained clear. Eleanor's downcast gaze flickered with understanding. Next, Poirot continued, the shredded codicil and journal pages. He produced a restored envelope and journal. At midnight, Mr. Pemberton returned to the study under the pretense of reviewing the Raven Club ledger. There he retrieved the codicil from its hiding place in the grandfather clock and tore the envelope, using the inverted watermark to conceal the family's intent. He then stripped pages from the journal, sealing them in amber wax from his own collection to mimic routine business. Poirot's glance swept the room at the mention of wax. Now observe the glove box liner fragment, he said, lifting the stitched scrap. Lord Ashcombe's Bentley bore a standard Fournier liner. To see the false clue, the murderer removed the genuine liner, replacing it with a near-identical cover crafted by his private upholsterer, bearing the overcast stitch. In his haste to search the glove box for a ledger extract, he tore the replacement, scattering fragments. One piece fell outside the car, as though the thief had fled in panic. Poirot aligned the fragment with its matching saddle-stitched counterpart, but the mismatch of stitches betrayed the substitution. All eyes turned to Mr. Pemberton, who sat rigid, gaze fixed on the floor. Poirot tapped the cane softly. In sewing false clues, murder weapon, shredded documents, planted leather fragments, the architect of this crime presumed that only the most cursory analysis would prevail. Instead, a single thread, stitch, wax, watermark unraveled the entire tapestry of deception. He paused, letting the magnitude of his words settle before the assembled group. Thus, the murderer's own hubris became his downfall. He believed his position as solicitor and confidant placed him beyond suspicion. Yet he overlooked the minute details that speak volumes to the little gray cells. Poirot stepped forward, addressing the silent Pemberton. Monsieur, you took a life to preserve secrets, then attempted to rewrite a will that would have exposed you. You arranged false leads against others, hoping to deflect and delay. But justice, like truth, cannot be forever obscured. He held Pemberton's gaze unflinchingly. And now, with all elements laid bare, we complete the circle of revelation. Inspector Morton advanced to formally read the charge. As he recited the articles of murder and forgery, Pemberton's shoulders sagged, and he met Poirot's eyes in resigned recognition. Around them, the other suspects exhaled, some with relief at their exoneration, others with the weight of grim knowledge that their protector had been betrayer all along. Poirot turned to us. Let this serve as a reminder. The human mind is both devious and precise. The smallest inconsistency will outlast the grandest deception. He tapped his temple affectionately. All is now revealed. With the reveal complete, I closed my notebook, amazed at how Poirot wove disparate strands into a seamless narrative of crime and motive. As the company dispersed, some to grieve, others to seek counsel, I lingered to marvel at the detective's singular triumph. That the true culprit, so confident in his own cunning, was unmasked by details minute yet indispensable. The path lay clear for the final resolution and the delivery of justice. Chapter 17, Outcome and Justice. The chill of dawn had not yet lifted when the household awoke to the full weight of yesterday's revelations. Word of Mr. Pemberton's confession and arrest had spread swiftly through the staff quarters and into the stables, carried on hushed whispers and sympathetic sighs. By mid-morning, the drawing-room resumed its role as the center of proceedings, this time to witness the administration of justice and the restoration of order. Monsieur Poirot stood by the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, as Lady Helena Ashcombe, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Dr. Linden and Miss Radcliffe assembled once more. Inspector Morton, flanked by uniformed constables, awaited instructions beside the mantel. I, too, took my place, mindful that today's gathering would mark the final formalities before the bereaved household could begin to heal. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, voice measured yet warm. We gather to ensure that the rightful course of justice is completed, and that the memory of Lord Ashcombe is honored by the integrity of these proceedings. He gestured to a small table bearing a set of official documents, the warrant for Pemberton's transfer to New Scotland Yard, the codicil reaffirming Lady Helena's inheritance, and the judicial notices concerning restitution of misappropriated funds. Inspector Morton stepped forward to present the warrant. By order of the Home Secretary and pursuant to the evidence compiled by Monsieur Poirot, I hereby commit Mr. Henry Pemberton to custody, to stand trial at the Central Criminal Court for the offenses of murder and forgery. He handed the folded parchment to a waiting constable, who bowed and secured it within his coat. Pemberton, escorted into the room in civilian dress, his wrists free but posture subdued, met the gaze of his former clients with a mixture of shame and resignation. Lady Helena rose to confront him, her expression composed yet resolute. "Mr. Pemberton," she said softly, "you betrayed Lord Ashcombe's trust and betrayed us all. Yet justice must be tempered with compassion. My claim upon you is not vengeance, but the assurance that this estate be returned to dignity." She extended a trembling hand, which he accepted with a nod. Poirot inclined his head. "Well spoken, madam. Restitution does not demand ruin, but requires accountability." He turned to Colonel Fitzwilliam. "Colonel, the funds misdirected from your investment will be restored to the club's forfeiture under Lady Helena's direction." The colonel's stern face softened in acknowledgment. "Thank you, monsieur," the colonel replied. "Though the loss was grievous, I welcome the chance to rebuild." Poirot then addressed Dr. Linden and Miss Radcliffe in turn. "Doctor, the payments withheld from your practice will be redressed, allowing you to continue your philanthropic work without stain. Mademoiselle, your allowance will be reinstated in full, ensuring your studies may proceed unencumbered." Both bowed gratefully. With the practicalities dispensed, Poirot turned to the solicitor one final time. "Mr. Pemberton, you will appear before the court in 4 weeks' time. Until then, your accommodation shall be arranged at Holloway, where you may reflect upon the consequences of your actions." His tone was firm, but not unkind. Pemberton closed his eyes briefly. "I accept my fate, Monsieur Poirot. I only regret the ruin I have wrought." His voice trembled with contrition. Poirot nodded. "Regret is the first step toward redemption, though it may not erase the past." He turned to us all. "And now, mesdames et messieurs, the affairs of this household shall proceed under Lady Helena's stewardship, guided by truth rather than secrecy." As the constables led Pemberton from the room, a hush fell. The soft click of the closing door carried an echo of finality. For a moment, the company stood in silent reflection, each grappling with the dual pain of loss and relief. Lady Helena stepped forward, gathering the codicil from the table. She held it aloft. "This document ensures my husband's wishes are honored. Today, I pledge that Umberwood Hall will remain a place of integrity and sanctuary, free from the shadows that once lurked within these walls." Her voice resonated with both sorrow and determination. Colonel Fitzwilliam moved to her side. "Lady Helena, you have my vow as both friend and investor, that these grounds will thrive again and that Lord Ashcombe's legacy will endure." He extended his hand, which she clasped in return. Dr. Linden and Miss Radcliffe exchanged glances of mutual support. The doctor placed a hand gently upon the younger woman's shoulder. "Your uncle will be proud of your fortitude," she said quietly. I observed this tableau, struck by the resilience of the human spirit in the face of tragedy. Poirot turned to me, his thoughtful gaze softening into a smile. "Hastings, when one confronts deception with honesty, one paves the way for healing. Outcome and justice do more than punish. They restore balance." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words. The room seemed to breathe again, the weight of secrecy lifted. Outside, a shaft of sunlight pierced the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing like motes of hope. As the gathering dispersed, Lady Helena to her desk, Colonel Fitzwilliam to review the restored ledgers, Dr. Linden to her clinic preparations, and Miss Radcliffe to secure her travel arrangements. I remained by Poirot's side. The final chapter of this tragic affair had closed, replaced by the promise of renewal and the steadfast conviction that, in the end, justice served both memory and future. And so, in the aftermath of darkness and deceit, the household found its path forward, guided by the enduring light of truth and the unwavering devotion of one Belgian detective, whose little gray cells had, once again, triumphed in the service of humanity. Chapter 18. The Closing Remark. A gentle hush settled over Umberwood Hall as the final formalities concluded. The last of the guests had taken their leave, and the staff moved quietly about, restoring order to rooms once charged with tension. I found Monsieur Hercule Poirot alone in the drawing room, seated in the high-backed armchair near the hearth, his cane resting across his lap. He regarded the flickering embers with an expression of contemplative satisfaction. I approached and offered a low bow. "It is done, monsieur. Justice has been served, and the household may at last breathe freely." Poirot's eyes, reflecting the firelight, turned to me with that familiar twinkle. "Hastings, you have been an excellent companion. Together, we had traversed a labyrinth of deceit and returned with truth in hand." He paused, then added in a softer tone, "Mays, it is never the grand gesture that shines brightest, but the small detail, the stitch, the smear, the watermark." I nodded, recalling how those minute inconsistencies had unraveled a tapestry of lies. "You once more proved that the devil in salvation lies in the details." He allowed himself a smile, though it was edged with wistfulness. "Yes, Lord Ashcombe's spirit rests easier now, and Lady Helena may govern these lands with the integrity he intended. The others, Colonel Fitzwilliam, Dr. Linden, Miss Radcliffe, will heal in time, and Pemberton may his remorse guide him toward some form of atonement." Rising, Poirot crossed the tall windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. "The human heart is a curious thing, Hastings. It harbors both cruelty and compassion. In this affair we witness both. Betrayal born of fear and greed, yet also loyalty, forgiveness, and the courage to rebuild." He turned back to me, hand raised in farewell. "And now, mon ami, our part in this drama draws to a close. I shall depart on the morrow, back to the familiar streets of London. But I carry the echoes of Umberwood Hall with me, lessons of human frailty, and the unerring power of little gray cells." I stepped forward, offer my arm. "Allow me to escort you to your chambers, monsieur. Even the greatest detective deserves rest after a triumph such as this." As we crossed the room, Harrison entered with a tray bearing a carafe of brandy and 2 glasses. Poirot accepted one with his customary thanks. We paused by the hearth, each raising a glass. "To justice," said Poirot, his voice resonant. "To justice," I echoed, clinking my glass gently against his. He sipped thoughtfully, then set the glass aside. "Hastings, promise me you will remember. In every case, no matter how dire, there is hope, so long as one persists in seeking the truth." His gaze softened, and the world, despite its shadows, remains ever capable of light. I smiled, moved by his conviction. "I promise, monsieur, and I shall carry your words with me always." He extended his gloved hand in farewell. "Until the next mystery, mon ami, may your path be illuminated by reason and kindness." I clasped his hand, feeling the warmth of his unspoken gratitude. "Until then, Poirot." With that, he turned and walked toward the hallway, his silhouette receding into deep shadows. I watched him go, the flicker of lamplight catching the brass of his cane one last time before it vanished into the quiet corridors. Left alone, I allowed the silence to settle around me. The embers glowed softly, a final testament to the fire of deduction that had burned bright within Poirot's mind. In that moment, I understood fully the truth of his philosophy, that in the smallest of details, one finds the greatest revelation. And as I stepped outside to the cool night air, I felt the weight of the case lift, replaced by a serene confidence that, so long as men like Hercule Poirot walked the earth, darkness would never prevail unchallenged. Thus ends the affair at Umberwood Hall, and thus ends the little gray cell's latest triumph. a testament to the enduring power of observation, the steadfast pursuit of justice, and the unbreakable bond of friendship.